even if you are somewhat insecure about your ability to interview successfully for a role, please don't bring your parents to the interview. You will be surprised that approximately 20% of the individuals who are now turned away from an interview who are Gen Z actually are turned away because they have brought their parents to an interview. That many people still do that today, believe it or not.
And so they want to bring the parents into the actual session?
To the workplace, to just before they meet the person who's going to interview them.
Okay, welcome back to the Tech Jobber podcast. You know, one complaint I get from a ton of people in tech these days are, I'm submitting my resume and it seems like it's just going to an HR black hole. So I thought, why don't we bring on one of the top HR guys in the area and ask him what exactly is going on? So I am very happy to announce today's guest, Ken Finneran. He is the VP of HR at eMed. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, and so for a guy that has interviewed and been involved in the process of hiring thousands of people in your career, why don't you just give us one just bad interview story?
So there are actually many, and some of that
Sure.
is interesting because you think some of the new technology, think AI, where while it can be very helpful, if you just, and candidates oftentimes do this, just rely on that to submit a resume, and then like many AI tools, we know it hallucinates. So it makes up things about the resume.
Sure.
And so we're seeing more and more, I'm going to call it resume lying, is becoming more prevalent than it has been in the past. Mm-hmm. So that's just a broad one. I think what may sound like a funny story to you, but it's becoming more and more popular, unfortunately. And so a message to the listeners and of the podcast is, even if you are somewhat insecure about your ability to interview successfully for a role, please don't bring your parents to the interview. You will be surprised that approximately 20% of the individuals who are now turned away from an interview who are Gen Z actually are turned away because they have brought their parents to an interview. That many people still do that today, believe it or not.
And so they want to bring the parents into the actual session?
To the workplace, to just before they meet the person who's going to interview them, and then they separate off. So again, prepare well for the interview. You can do this, you got this, but you don't need that extra support coming in with you to the actual workplace in the interview location.
Yeah, leave them in the car at worst, okay?
Yeah, please.
So, I mean, Ken, I want to get to a lot of your experience. eMed, obviously, everyone wants to get into healthcare tech, and then Kaseya as well, another company a lot of people want to get into. So I want you to give some tips on that. But why don't we talk about your background a little bit, how you got into the HR space?
So I got into the HR space through project management, actually, running HR programs and hiring programs for different scholarship programs of the U.S. Congress and the German equivalents, and both from the U.S. as well as in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. After that, I took over as a director of a human resources consultancy in Poland. So I came at it from a business perspective from the very beginning. My foray into HR was not your typical path of, think of a benefits specialist into an HR business partner to a director to a VP, but rather from a director of an HR consultancy, working with a number of clients, solving their HR problems, and then had the opportunity when I moved back to the States to take over as the VP of HR for a global logistics provider, Hellman Worldwide Logistics, based out of Doral for the Americas, and then became their chief people officer for the Americas shortly thereafter, and was with them for a little over 9 years. transferred from there then to a company that most folks may not know, but they know the brands. And that is a company called National Beverage. National Beverage is best known as the maker of LaCroix sparkling water.
Sure.
Which when I joined was about an $800 million organization. During the 3 years that I was there, it grew to over $4 billion in terms of valuation, NASDAQ listed still today. And then based on that hyper growth experience, had the opportunity to go to Kaseya.
Yeah.
And Kaseya was just getting ready for some explosive growth, M&A based growth as well. And over the roughly 3.5 years that I was with Kaseya, we did about 11 acquisitions. Was responsible for some of the due diligence of those, the integration of those, going from about 450 employees globally to about 2,000 when I left, and preparing for another 2,000, which happened in the year subsequent once I had left the organization.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff was Kaseya doing when you were there, and kind of what are they doing now?
So Kaseya is really a company that's best known for providing IT solutions for small and mid-sized businesses. So that is endpoint management was their bread and butter. Think of someone who is all of the things we utilize in terms of technology, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, a cell phone, is connected somewhere. So also the routers and things like that, servers, all of those are connected. They need security, they need other things. That's what Kaseya specializes in, again, for the small and mid-sized businesses. They still today work directly with companies. Those are usually mid-sized companies, because many of the small companies go through what is called an MSP, a managed service provider, who provides those solutions as if they were that company's internal IT department.
Right.
And then they use a set of solutions to provide to those companies. Now they're best known for after acquiring Datto, for their endpoint management solutions, as well as backup disaster recovery and cybersecurity.
Okay. And so what type of people were you? You're involved in everything. Were you mainly? It's a lot of tech salespeople that I know that have gone through Kaseya.
Yeah, especially here in Miami, we were hiring, the bulk of the hiring, I would say 80% of the hiring was the tech sales force.
Yeah.
So account managers who were selling the Kaseya solutions in those of the acquired companies that then got rolled into Kaseya. That was also in the customer support side. So those who were dealing with any customer issues as they arose. It was finance, so think of accounts payables, accounts receivables. One of the biggest hurdles that any tech company has is developing a payment system that is reliable and easy, so that the customers get the bills and are billed for what they should be billed for, not billed for things they shouldn't be billed for, and have an easy payment method. You don't want to create hurdles to doing business with you on the payment side. And so that was a big element of creating customer excellence through solutions that we were developing there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we have a lot of tech salespeople that watch the show. Why don't you give us some tips on maybe Kaseya specific or general tips? You've been on a lot of those interviews. And is it a lot of junior people they were hiring? I know some junior people, I know some senior people they were hiring. I mean, what was it like?
Yeah, it was a mix of both. So there were junior individuals. Usually they are individuals who are, again, hungry, but that can be hungry coming from in the sense of wanting to succeed. And so whatever that background is, as a salesperson in general, that desire to say, I want to learn. I want to learn your processes, your systems, what I'm selling inside and out, so that I can present it in the best light. I have such and such a track record. And it doesn't always matter what that track record is, if it is in some type of a customer-facing role. That customer-facing role could be a role in a restaurant. It could be a role in a telecommunications provider. Think of a T-Mobile store or a Verizon store. It could be someone who has sold tickets at Marlin Stadium or at the Heat Arena. All of those were places where we actively hired from. And folks from those backgrounds were very, very successful. It was also folks from, interestingly enough, some of the recruiting agencies who had good people skills, but were used to selling business to business, trying to get business for their agencies, came and were successful in selling at Kaseya. So I think that those were some of the backgrounds, but some of the things that really made them stand out, and I would say this is really a tip I would give to any aspiring, not only sales professional, but anyone who's applying for roles. Don't just rely on the one-click easy apply on LinkedIn. Do your research, reach out directly to the company, to the hiring manager, to the HR team, express why you want to be hired. This is not just about sending the resume, sending a cover letter, but reaching out separately through a LinkedIn message or an email expressing why you are truly interested and why you stand out from other candidates in the marketplace.
Okay, so you recommend that they do that follow-up either via LinkedIn or if you can get the email as well?
Absolutely, I do, yes.
And so what were some, we'll say, trigger words that maybe were kind of red flags that like, man, this person might not be the type of candidate we're looking for, or green flags?
So I think red flags are, and we know that there are a lot of individuals who these days are interested in that work-life balance, and there's nothing wrong with that, but especially in a heavy sales capacity where it is all about making the calls, delivering on numbers. Then if you are focused on, well, how many days off do I have? What are the working hours? Everything that seems like too structured and wanting to feel almost entitled to having something from the company is usually a red flag in sales. You can ask about culture. You can ask about how quickly can I progress if I deliver. Again, focusing on results, delivering on promises, delivering on expectations. Those are key words that if you bring that and can give examples, that is all very, very positive for any interviewer, not only in the sales space, but any space actually.
And you know, a lot of these big tech companies, it's kind of unlimited days off, but it's kind of like, supposedly that people take less days off when there's no kind of set amount of days off. Was that how you guys operated?
So interestingly enough, both at Kaseya and at eMed, we moved away from the unlimited days off to a more structured program to encourage individuals to take time off, because we found, and the data supports this, exactly what you just shared. People were taking less time, but we saw greater burnout as a result of that. And so wanting to balance that, we know we had very eager, ambitious team members, and yet at the same time, if they are only working, and not taking time out or time away to rejuvenate, renew themselves, then we found that burnout rates were actually increasing. So we changed that at Kaseya to a more traditional time off. And we did the same thing, interestingly enough, at eMed. When I joined, I was employee number 71 at the company. Right now, we're over 1,000 employees globally. And so that growth period, as we were growing there, we said the same thing. While it is convenient to have that unlimited time off, people oftentimes get confused by it, to be quite honest.
Like a
and
trap.
You're right. They trapped. I know it's unlimited, but am I going to be looked down upon if I do take that time off? So we just alleviated that by saying, no, take the time off. We want you to take the time off. We want you to rejuvenate. We want you to be back and at full strength while you're here to be able to deliver.
Yeah. And so another thing that I know was taken, what years were you there exactly?
So roughly 3 years ago to, let's call it 6 years ago.
Okay. All
At
right.
Kaseya.
So 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I know basically companies on the East Coast were, I was in Philly for many years, and they were taking a lot of Silicon Valley tactics and bringing them to the East Coast. A lot of them just didn't work, and maybe in Silicon Valley, I think they scrapped some of them, like the open office plan. Did you guys experiment stuff like that? Anything that kind of flopped when you tried it, like the unlimited days off?
So that 2018 to 2021, remember that a lot of that was COVID time. So while Kaseya now has, I believe, or is in 4 or 5 different buildings here in downtown, or Brickell area primarily, in downtown, we were in one and just moving into a second at the time that I left. So in those spaces, it was primarily standard, I'm going to call it standard cubicles and the things you would expect from a sales floor.
Sure.
And the things that we experimented with a little more were common areas that encourage collaboration. So an open kind of deli type of area that then had a table to gather around, some sitting areas that were there to write on walls and whiteboards and things like that to encourage more collaboration rather than just a standing meeting in a cubicle area. But, and then as we built out some of the areas and the floors in the headquarter office, we built some of the phone booths, if you're familiar with them, sitting areas for 2 people, 4 people, just quiet areas and things like that. But we didn't go Google-esque, if you will, in terms of some of the Silicon Valley elements.
Yeah. Okay. So then so you said eMed was how many people when you first started?
70, roughly.
Okay. So what attracted you to a obviously much smaller company than Kaseya?
Yeah. So at heart, I think many of my colleagues would see me as a builder and a connector. And so oftentimes that startup, PE-backed type of enterprise, having had 3 businesses of my own in the past, is something that entrepreneurial nature is something that was very attractive. And then as you alluded to earlier, the 2 areas that a lot of people are really eager to get into are healthcare and technology. And this was the mission of eMed is democratizing healthcare. And that's something that resonated deeply with me. But being part of building it essentially from the ground up and writing the rules for the future of healthcare as we're doing it was something that was very appealing and inspiring to me.
And you think, your work on building out Kaseya and their prime years probably was what attracted eMed to your profile, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So you say democratizing healthcare. Why don't you just explain exactly what that's kind of like a thing people say, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, and I love that question because missions are there and they should be inspiring, but oftentimes they fall flat when it comes to execution. And in our case, democratizing healthcare began with a mission of providing accessibility, affordability, and convenience. And COVID provided an ideal test case for us. If anyone was traveling during COVID and was using an at-home test kit, especially one that was proctored, we partnered with Abbott Labs, and then we convinced the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, to allow international travel with a verified lab report, which meant that a proctor would be on the other end of the phone, watch you do the test, would verify you are who you say you are, and then help you interpret the result after 15, 20 minutes once it came back. You received that verified lab report to your email. That enabled travel to come back. It enabled the cruise lines to get back into business. It allowed folks to get back into school, universities, et cetera, or be sent home accordingly if someone was coughing and would just go and test. That was the start. We then used the same type of platform to say what other areas and business challenges or areas of business could we disrupt. The next one was in the area of drug screening. A lot of recruiters, companies, and even the US penal system were saying there's an outdated way that this is done, setting appointments 3 days in advance, usually at a Quest or a LabCorp, and people have hard times getting there.
Yep.
Even with an appointment, they wait 3-4 hours, and then they wait another week, up to a week, for the results. We partnered with an FDA-cleared and approved company that then allowed us to do the same test using an oral swab and have the results within 25 minutes. Wow. Real time. So time is money when you're hiring, as you know all too well.
Yes.
And the best example is probably for, let's say, the judicial system. If someone was arrested for a drug charge, they need to be tested. Rather than put them into a van, take them to a Quest or a LabCorp with 2 officers, wait all that time, then take them back. You can do it right there in the facility, have the result in 20 minutes, not have it real time, no appointments needed, having the results immediately.
With the same accuracy?
Same accuracy. Wow. Then we said, well, what else are people struggling with? And the reality is, if you or I try to call our primary care physician right now, the chances are we'll get an appointment in 3 months. That our healthcare system, unfortunately, is broken. And so we said, how can we provide for the same type of adherence, compliance, convenience without any scheduling needed to do things like a personal health check? So we partnered with a company that allows us to use microneedling and microsuction to pull a little vial of blood, not the 4 to 6 vials that you get if you go for your annual exam. It does the 11 most common tests on that limited amount of blood. You get the results in 2 days. With that, we're able to then go in and, for example, if you're either A1C or if your BMI is of a certain level, you may qualify for GLP-1 medications, all the rage these days. And like we Ozempic. Have a medical, exactly, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, things like that. And so we have a program that is a supervised, proctored medical weight loss solution that allows companies through our program to have maximum adherence, meaning there's a lot of people on those that medically shouldn't be on them. And a lot of companies want to be able to offer that as a benefit, but they don't because they realize it will increase their claims too much. So we have ways that we then are providing adherence, compliance, while still offering the benefit to employees, and then following up with them through those proctors, those guides, who will check in weekly with those individuals.
Wow. Wow. So, and you guys, at the size of your company, you have the ability to kind of change direction very quickly. Obviously, you guys were big in COVID, now the drug screening, and obviously the rage now is the Ozempic, Mounjaro type thing. So that's incredible.
It's really been fascinating because as a startup and as an entrepreneurial organization, always being able to look for what's next and then go into that area. Just last weekend, we launched a new business unit, which is called eMed, which is for women's health. And we expect that to take off. There's a huge need in the marketplace for things like that. Think UTIs, yeast infections, and several other services that can be provided as part of that. But yes, that's yet another area. Each year, we typically launch at least one new business unit, which anywhere else would be a whole new company. But yet we integrate those, offering all of those solutions within one umbrella organization called eMed.
Yeah, and how long does that take? Someone has an idea, hey, we should really go after this market. From idea to launch, product launch to consumer, how long does that take?
That's a great question, and it varies by product is the real answer. It can take as short as, I would say, 4 to 6 months, and typical is probably 8 months to a year, which is still very fast compared to large companies. If you think of pharmaceutical companies launching a new product or something, that's usually years in the making.
It's like turning a tanker with those companies with all the moving parts, but you guys can be nice and flexible, so that's great.
That's right.
So you went from 70 to 1,000?
Yes.
Okay. What's been the majority of types of jobs that you've hired there?
So that 70 to 1,000 was a mixture of organic growth and M&A activity. So eMed is the largest and preferred partner of the National Institutes of Health here in the US and the #1 partner of the National Health System in the UK. We acquired a company in the UK that has also brick and mortar type of clinics and was offering solutions. So the roles here in the US, and that the reason I bring that up is it differs by geography. In the UK, it was more on the clinical side. So think of pharmaceutical individuals who could write scripts, or mental health practitioners, or general health practitioners. Here in the US, it has primarily been on the tech side. So think of software engineers, think of QA, think of platform engineers, as well as finance roles, marketing roles, typical more headquarter roles, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. And so I started off the episode talking about people's frustration with people in your position. Well, you get blamed, we'll say. You take the blame for a lot of these frustrations, but let's just say you said you hire a lot of software engineers. Yeah. If you were a software engineer tomorrow, how would you get your own attention? Now, you mentioned LinkedIn, email. Would you apply on the website? Would you apply on LinkedIn through Recruit? I mean, what would you do?
If I were a software engineer, I would apply wherever you find it, it's going to come in, but I would do the additional follow-up piece. So find Ken Finneran or find the HR person and probably also the CIO's name and send a quick message. This doesn't have to be a whole letter, but just a quick message. I applied for XY position, let's say software engineer, and am really interested in eMed because I'm very attracted to your mission, or because I want to help democratize healthcare. That simple statement shows you've done a little research, even if it was going on to the website and finding what is the mission of eMed. That goes a long way. The other piece is don't be afraid to follow up every so often and say, I realize you're probably getting hundreds of resumes, because part of the reason why HR teams don't reach back out, or they even put into an ad that we will only reach out to those candidates who will be interviewed in the process, is for an average software developer role here in Miami, we will get 300 to 500 applications. Wow. So even from a timing perspective, imagine we have 10 different roles open. That's 3,000 to 5,000 applicants that we're dealing with. And from a time perspective, we simply don't have the ability to give a full explanation as to why we wouldn't be moving forward with someone. But that's also even more reason why someone should reach out and separate themselves from the pack, showing their true interest beyond just a one-click easy apply. Yeah.
So what does it actually look like? I think it's important for people to, you said there's 300 to 500 resumes. So that is just in your inbox in a system. And is AI sorting that by who's the best fit, or is it searching for keywords on the resumes? What's going on there?
So we do utilize some AI tools. However, every resume we look at, we don't rely on AI to do a full initial scrape. We have a person looking at each of the resumes for each and every role. So the person will determine, and it may be we need someone based at our headquarters for a certain role, and someone is based in India or Indonesia or Europe somewhere, and we aren't willing to reload such a person. So that's kind of the first exit.
Getting rid of the locations.
That's right.
First.
Location
That's right.
could be the first exit point, if you will, for those individuals. Then you're looking, do they have the right experience? We have knockout questions for almost each and every role. There's usually 2 or 3. Are you willing to work downtown 5 days a week in our because we are primarily an in-office work environment? That can be another knockout. If someone self-discloses, no, I'm looking for a remote or a hybrid role, that's another disqualifier. Then we look at experience. Is it more of a match? And so let's say from that 300, there are then 50 out of those. And you're probably going to get about 20%, anywhere 10 to 20% of those who initially apply are remotely qualified, I'm going to call it.
Right.
So as a result, you're going to say 30 to 60 off the 300. So hence the 50 that I mentioned. Out of that, then we'll take a second look, and we'll usually whittle it down to, let's say, the top 15 or so by role, 10 to 15. Those folks we will interview. We try to have no more than a 3-step process. That is not necessarily standard in the market, but it is a best practice for fast-moving organizations. That will entail an initial interview, phone interview, usually a Google Meet interview with someone from the HR team. Then it will be with the hiring manager. Again, usually a Google Meet, so virtual. And then the last is bringing them on site to experience our headquarter facility and meet other members of the team. That can be up to 4 interviews. Oftentimes people pair up for those. So it is a couple of hours, they meet, and we make decisions after that. We don't want it to be a drawn out process. That whole process usually takes less than 2 weeks.
Okay, and that's good, because even people that don't get it, if you draw, I've had clients draw it out for 7-8 weeks, and then they ghost at the end.
Yeah.
So some organizations it's obviously leaves a bad taste in the candidate's mouth, but then they're telling people.
That's
don't
right.
bother with those guys. So I love that you guys keep it, even if it's a no, at least they learned within 2 weeks. So that's
right. And everyone who goes through any stage of the actual interview process is getting feedback on you weren't selected. There's no ghosting period. They will get information, and they're informed even when will they get information. So I had interviews earlier today. I let folks know that by the end of the day on Wednesday, they'll hear from me in regards to the next step.
And as far as the in-person interview with tech companies, I think a lot of tech companies can be very casual, and then, just for whatever, 60 years of people in offices, or whatever, 70 years people in offices, you show up to the interview in a shirt and tie. That can sometimes maybe turn off an interviewer at a tech company. What's it like with you guys? How should they dress, basically?
So my advice to anyone who's coming in for an interview is you're going to want to be dressed, I'm going to call it one level above the interviewer or the company standard. So you can ask about that when someone sets up the interview with you and say, what is your office policy in terms of dress? How are most folks coming in? And they will probably say, in the case of eMed, most folks come in a pair of slacks and a polo shirt. That's great. In that case, put on a pair of khakis or something like that, and a collared shirt would be that one level above. If you come in a suit and tie, it's not necessarily going to be frowned upon, but it's a question you could have asked, and it's more relatable if you are closer to the dress that the person interviewing you has. If you come in a suit and tie, yes, you're going to have the professional attire, and yet you may also be docked points in someone's mind for not being as relatable with the team that is there on site.
Yeah, okay. And any other tips as far as healthcare IT? Obviously, you're hiring tons of people in this space. Everyone wants to get in this space. It's basically recession-proof, kind of one of the only recession-proof industries. What would you focus on? Maybe specifically for eMed, but then things you see in general.
So I think this answers both parts of that question. I think we hear a lot about digital disruption, and so embracing that, and that is especially around the area of AI. I think because it is so new, a lot of folks were hearing this whole thing about prompt engineering, and do I want to become a prompt engineer? I'm the first to say that's not a job. Prompt engineer is something all of us are becoming thanks to the technology. And so the ability to know how to leverage new technologies, the same way that many of us, older individuals such as myself had to learn how to use the World Wide Web. Then we had to use cell phones. Then we had other search technology. And now with AI, how do we leverage that to make us more productive and efficient? That is key. So AI is part of many of our job descriptions, but not as an AI role. But are you able to leverage, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, or others, in order to do your work more effectively? So that would be one. Stay up with the technology. Show and have examples of how you are a lifelong learner. Things are changing so quickly in healthcare and tech that if you aren't committed to learning, there will probably be a question in the interview with any technology company. Tell me about how you stay on top of the industry, on top of your game, on top of your niche within this. There certainly should be that question, because that's critical to understanding how are you staying on top of the newest trends, how are you leveraging that technology. In terms of healthcare, it can be asking questions and knowing, does someone have a healthcare related background? What I mean by that, not everyone has to have worked in a hospital, not everyone has to have worked with at-home telehealth kits. If someone was in pharmaceuticals, if someone was working in a health center at a university, or if they were tangentially related to healthcare, this could be a very good way to disrupt the healthcare system because they're coming in with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, any specific technologies you're seeing? I mean, HL7, Epic, stuff like that?
Yeah, so especially on the research part of our business and the lab part of our business, yes. So the standards that are common in terms of the automated health records, the HL7, all of those things, you're going to want to be familiar with those. If you are looking at the technology, our organization is primarily a Google Suite type of organization, and yet we leverage for some of our coding and things like that, Java and common languages, developer languages that are out there. Be certified in some of those. That's another key tip. As you are getting educated, also find opportunities for internships would be another thing I would highly recommend. Most of us nowadays can go through a 2-year or 4-year program successfully. But if you show that you were doing that and getting additional certifications. And you were able to apply that knowledge, because at the end of the day, anyone hiring you is making a bet that you can deliver more value to the organization than what they are paying you. That's basically the employment model.
Right.
And so as a result, you want to show I learned and I applied. Anything that you can do to show that is giving you a leg up in the interview process.
Okay. Good stuff. Definitely get some certifications and get your HL7 and what else? Epic, EMR. Have
Yes.
all of those on the resume. But also, Ken, I know you're involved in some local technology groups that you're providing, hiring kind of consultation work for. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and exactly what you're telling them exactly?
So one of the primary organizations that I'm involved with is the Miami Tech Talent Coalition. Anyone interested in tech should look into the organization. It is funded by a grant from the federal government, $10 million grant, part of the Good Jobs Challenge, that is then led and in place to help individuals find pathways into emerging technologies. I have the pleasure of co-chairing a working group, if you will, a committee that is all about emerging talent. So those getting their first jobs in many cases in the tech area. And so we're talking with employers as well as the education institutions, the employers, to say, are you offering internships, apprenticeships, and other opportunities, entry-level roles for those. Don't put an entry-level role that requires 3 years of experience when it really does not. Again, giving folks real opportunities at the beginning. Then we talk with educational institutions to make sure they're offering programs that are preparing the students with the skills that are needed by employers. These are not only the hard skills, so think of the technology skills, coding skills, Python skills, other things that may be needed, but then they are also what are oftentimes referred to as soft skills. I refer to them as power skills, because the more technologically advanced organizations become and the more reliant we become on technology, the more important those power skills will become. Things like communication, things like influencing skills, things like oftentimes referred to as emotional intelligence, but I'll even refer to empathy. All of these, adaptability, these are the things that over the course of your career are really going to set you apart. So make sure you are honing in and developing those skills at the same time that you are developing those hard skills.
Yeah, and real quick, obviously you see everything as far as candidates go, and you're working with the colleges. I'm always kind of curious, especially in the tech space, with the rise of the boot camps.
Yeah.
What do you think colleges will be able to adapt, or are more people just going to say, well, I could spend a couple thousand on this, and they're guaranteeing me a job. I'm going to spend a couple $100,000 on this. There's no guarantee. So where do you see that going in the future?
I love this question, and a second institution that I'm a part of is the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, where I am the vice chair of the Education and Workforce Development Committee. So I'm actively working with a number of colleges right now, as well as with employers developing, if you will, curriculum for the future. The question is a great one to ask. I think that higher education is going to be one of the most disrupted areas in the coming 10 to 15 years. It's already starting. And I think we are seeing in most colleges a smaller footprint in terms of brick and mortar college areas, and that is aligned to the market as well. You have more students studying virtually. You have a lot of folks remote who want to just call in and learn very effectively that way. And there are learning management systems that are very effective in universities to help with that, tutoring programs, etc. I think that's going to continue as a trend. The other thing that is problematic for most universities is somewhat out of their control, not totally, and that is the way that the states mandate how curriculum is developed and approved and then implemented at universities. If states don't begin implementing I'm going to call it a Silicon Valley type of rapid implementation plan, think of the lean startup, if you will, that is quick iteration. If it takes on average 2 years to go from an idea for a new course to approval and implementation, there's no way that that course is going to be applicable, especially in high tech. By the time the second group trains, so 3 years down the line, it's already outdated.
Right. The technology might not be used
Technology
anymore.
is already past that.
Yeah.
So the states need to also take a major role in this and embrace a process of rapid iteration and rapid implementation. Without that, they're going to damage the whole higher education framework and make it essentially non-applicable because it's simply outdated in so many ways.
And I work with a lot of boot camps as sponsors, obviously, and I see the way they just add a new course. It's AI, great. All right, we'll get some of the top people in the world. We'll bring them in. They'll teach our students, and for 10 grand, you can be very well educated in a matter of weeks, really, in some of these technologies. So, you know what colleges should do? Do you think with the bureaucracy involved, will they be able to?
It's a question we don't know the answer yet. I'm actually optimistic, especially here in Miami. I see the largest institution of higher learning in the United States, Miami-Dade College, being one of the most nimble universities I've ever come across. Wow. They have 2 AI centers already built out. They're building a 3rd on the Kendall campus. They have some of the best AI experts in the world coming and speaking to students in the community. They have negotiated with the city and the county. They now have grants and scholarships, so anyone in the community who is a Miami-Dade resident and wants to study about AI can do so for free, even get a certification in AI awareness, practical AI, and can go and do that. That's an example of a university that has been very nimble and is actually at the forefront of change in this space. I think you have other universities who are progressing, but did not do so fast enough. And so the verdict is still out, quite honestly, on those. I think a lot of them are relying on some of the law programs, medical programs that are very traditional, but those are going to be disrupted as well.
Yeah. And
so they need to change and change quickly if they are to remain relevant. Interesting stat I heard last week, that St. Thomas University, which most folks probably don't even know, it's a smaller university along the Palmetto, great Christian university, and yet has the highest scores in the state for individuals passing the bar exam now. And yet it's not Florida or UF or FSU or some of the other large law schools. And I think that's partially because they've been quite nimble and have changed the way that they're teaching and the way they're doing things to achieve those higher scores. And I think that's going to be the challenge for all of the traditional research in large state universities. If they don't change, they're not going to remain relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And then Anything else? I mean, I kind of want to recap all of you gave some great tips to get that resume to the top of the list. And obviously he's dealing with very big piles of resumes, as you've heard. So if you're not hearing back, that's why. But reach out directly. Well, obviously make sure you're qualified first. Like, be realistic.
Correct.
So reach out directly over LinkedIn. If you can get the email, there are ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Shoot a quick note showing some level of research being done on the company, and don't be too overdressed and in that stuffy tie if everyone's in flip-flops in
That's
the tech
right.
company.
And you mentioned the research part when you reach out. I think that's equally important, if not even more important, for the interview. Mm-hmm. Make sure to go online. There are so many resources, whether it's the company website, Glassdoor, built-in, so many resources out there where you can find great information about companies. Do your research before coming in. Nothing is a bigger turnoff when you are in an interview and starting to ask, well, what has you excited about the role and what you learned as you were doing your research on the organization? When someone then says, I didn't really do any research, I don't know much, what can you tell me?
Right.
That shows a general lack of interest. So do your homework. Treat this as a job already. Your being in the hiring process is your job before you are hired. Mm-hmm. So treat it as such, be responsible with your actions, and if you do that, then you'll get to the top of the list.
Yeah. Anything else for folks at home to get a shot at eMed?
I would say go onto our website. We are hiring right now. We have about 10 roles open right now, so please go on and look. For eMed, again, we are a 3.5-year-old startup, so it's someone who likes that entrepreneurial, fast-paced environment. That's not for everyone. Some folks want to be part of a much larger organization that is perhaps slower paced, and your responsibility is from, I'm going to call it not A to Z, but it's from A to E. Mm-hmm. If that's not eMed, we all wear multiple hats. And so that's a key part when you are looking for the companies that you want to join. Find one that fits your personality, your desires, your values. And it's okay to say this company, as good as the role may sound, probably isn't the right fit. But companies that recruit well are also looking for that fit. So do your homework. And if it's the fit, in the case of eMed, we'd love to have you apply.
Well, awesome. Ken, thanks so much for being here. I'm going to take some of those tips and kind of deliver them to the candidates I'm presenting to my clients as well. Okay, hope you guys got a lot out of this, and we'll catch you guys next time.